So Tony owns, I didn't know this, he owns 33 companies totaling $5 billion in revenue, and of course is a #1 New York Times best-selling author. Tonight he's going to share more about his own journey through his personal upbringing and how he can teach anyone to believe in themselves. Now, he is being interviewed by our own Dr. David Agus, who, of course, is the professor of medicine and engineering at the University of Southern California and CEO of the Lawrence J. Ellison Institute for Transformational Medicine and our co-chair of Fortune Brainstorm Health. So I am very excited to see this. I have a front row seat right here. And with that, please, I want a big round of applause for Tony Robbins and Dr. Agus.
That's quite an introduction on you.
Yes, it is. Thank you. I think she gave me way too much credit for what she's done with her own life.
You created Watson. That's so amazing.
Isn't it amazing? I created the internet before that.
So obviously, Tony, everybody knows about you. Presidents, CEOs, you name it, you come in and there's something about you that changes them and they get transfixed. Every day, you know, I can only imagine the stress you have that people are putting, you know, their trust in you. Does it stress you? Are you stressed?
I physically stress my body to extremes because I've developed a process to take people and help them change in a weekend. But my idea of a weekend is 50 hours. And most people want set for a 3-hour movie. So, you know, that somebody spent $300 million on, and I got 12,000 people in a stadium. I got back from last night up in San Jose. We had 4 days and nights like this. And we actually had a halter on me and a group of researchers that work with Olympic athletes, and I burned 9,500 calories in 1 day, in 9 hours. The battery died before I finished. I went 12 hours. I burned enough calories for 2 marathons. My jumps, because I'm jumping constantly, was the equivalent of 2 NBA games. My lactate, as you all know, at 1 is hard to talk. It was 14, and I was still going strong at 12 hours. So there's some physical stress because I'm a believer that talking is bullshit, that you got to go deep. You got to get people to experience things. I think a belief is a poor substitute for an experience. And if I get someone to experience changing something, if I can do it in a really potent way where they really feel it, then, you know, if you do that over and again, you start to get someone to actually be trained to get a new result. It's not about belief. You know, belief is important. It's not about confidence. I heard that kind of description. It's never been what's about. It's strategy. But if you don't have the certainty, you're not going to execute. So I think I've spent a lifetime accumulating patterns. There are patterns we all have. There are patterns that make you angry, patterns that make you sad, patterns that make you excited, patterns that make you grateful, patterns in health, as you well know. So like all of you who are the best at what you do, I'm massively into pattern recognition, pattern utilization, and pattern creation. And those things help me to create changes that wouldn't have happened before. And I get the phone call when, you know, the athlete's burning down on national television, Serena Williams, I got to produce the result now. So I fly without a net, and that's part of why I've got good, you know, for 40 years. This is my 41st year doing this. I started when I was 3, of course. And then I also have the same thing where, like, you'll get a child that's suicidal. I've never lost a suicide, knock on wood, I'm sure I will someday, but out of thousands, and we follow up, make films. Because when people are going to kill themselves, they have a reason. They believe that dying is more painful than living. You shift that, they don't kill themselves. I get the phone call, true story, the President of the United States calls me, Clinton, and says, they're going to impeach me in the morning. What should I do? I'm 31 years old, and I'm getting this phone call. It's like, could you have called me sooner? You know, that's the first part, right? But so by doing deep practice, by practicing without a net, by putting in a situation, you've got to find a way. And because I really care, most times I've been able to find that way. And then that builds your own sense of certainty. And also, I put myself in enough crazy environments that I've had to adapt to so many things that there are only so many problems. And there are unlimited ways to change them as far as I'm concerned. So when someone who has more variability meets somebody with less variability, the one with the most variability will dominate and be able to help.
How do you turn off?
That's a great question. My wife is a huge part of it, my kids, my grandkids. But I don't feel stressed, so I'm not turning off. I certainly relax. I play squash, I read, I go to movies and do simple things, fun things. But my life is a mission. And so it isn't stressful for me, it's exciting for me. I can't wait to wake up in the morning and you know, because we've worked together, I don't sleep a whole lot. I'm sleeping better. I got rid of the sleep apnea, which was very helpful. But I was sleeping then 4 hours a night, which is horrible. But most of my life, it's been 5 or 6 hours. And now I'm making myself sleep closer to 6 as much as I can based on, education, what sleep does.
You won't even remember this, but I met you about 15, 16 years ago. It was, I gave my first corporate speaking gig. And I was scared to death. I'd never done it before. It was in London. And I get there, and Liz Murdoch says, David, I'm so glad you're going to speak, but you're going to follow Tony Robbins. And I was like, what? And, watching you on stage, I mean, you are an athlete. Yes. I mean, in what you do, you engage people. 90% of the audience, like this kind of audience, didn't want to be engaged, and yes. You're able to do it.
Yes.
The feedback loop has to be there. Are you watching every person and seeing, I have to amp it up, amp it down? Is there a feedback loop when you do this?
Of course. Everything is based, everything in my world is based on coming up with the outcome that will serve and then going at it. But most of the time, your approach going at it doesn't work. No one else knows that, but you can see it doesn't work. So it's constantly changing your approach until you can get where you want to go. When I enter an audience and I'm going to give a talk of any sort, I do a huge amount of homework in advance. I prepare, I see who's there. But then when I stand up here, I wouldn't be sitting like this. I'm scanning constantly. And who I'm looking for, the people think it's bullshit. I'm going after the people who got dragged there. I'm not looking for the people clapping for me. Those people will always be there, and there's some people who clap even if you're terrible, so you don't want to let other people's view make you feel good. I'm looking for who isn't there so that I can reach them, so I can show them that there's something real here. Because most people don't know who I am. They'd see 10,000 people jumping in a stadium and they go, oh, it's just a big motivational pump up. I've never been a motivator. It's never been what I've been about. I think motivation is useful. It's like a warm bath. You should probably take a bath or a shower every day, but you need more than that. You need strategy. But what I really believe is energy. Most of us grew up, and right now, most of you are learning in the traditional style you did even when you were in school. You were trained to go to your seat and be silent and be polite and nice. But the world we live in today isn't like that. The world today, if somebody sits down and waits for someone to tell them what to do, they're in trouble. So my approach is constantly stimulating and seeing what's real, getting people to be raw, and getting to truth. As corny as it is, the truth sets us free, and we all can find our own truth as long as we put ourselves in an environment where we don't tolerate anything less than that.
How do you know, how do you get better? How do you know, listen, I was good today, but I want to be great? What are the metrics you use? I mean, is there data you get back? How do you improve?
Well, we have all the social media data, which we use big data to take a look at, but I also look at it individually because there's nuances that you pick up in that way. So I feed that, look at that. But my biggest piece is watching the audience, and then, every day of my life, I get feedback. I'm walking down the street, a dozen people come and tell me these beautiful stories, how their life has changed. And very much like she shared earlier, they'll give me way too much credit. So I always straighten them out and go, look, you did this. I'm glad I got to help. And I try to keep that balance with everybody. But my measurement is both emotional state impact as well as execution. Did they lose 20 pounds? Did they go turn their business around? My business is organized around, I really want to help people improve all the qualities, areas of their life, but there's about 7 that matter the most. It's your body, it's your emotions, it's your relationships, it's the way you manage time, it's finances, it's your work, and it's the spiritual side of life. And so what I spent my life doing is modeling people that are the best in the world. You find a couple who've been together for 65 years in their 80s, late 80s, and they're still making love and passionate, not just hanging out. They're not lucky, they're doing something different. So I'm constantly finding those patterns so that hopefully I can compress decades into days. I can learn from those decades of life experience, save it, bring the answer here to myself and others, and see a measurable impact.
And you like it, you enjoy it.
I don't have to work, fortunately, another day of my life and haven't for 20 years almost. So I work harder today than I ever did when I had to. It's always been what I love. I've never done it for the money. I have lots of companies, that make me a lot of money, but it's not about the money for me. It's about changing lives. And when I was growing up, I went through a really tough childhood. My mom was a beautiful soul, but she abused prescription drugs and alcohol. And people have different personalities in that area. And I'm the oldest. I have a younger brother, 5, younger sister, 7 years younger. And she bashed my head against the wall. Or she'd think I was lying, and she'd pull liquid soap down my throat till I threw up. It was pretty brutal. But it made me become a practical psychologist. It made me have to learn what makes people get crazy, get angry, get excited, get loved. And I had to learn how to manage her to protect my brother and sister, and to some extent myself. And so, you know, if my mom had been the woman I'd hoped she'd been, I wouldn't be the man I'm proud to be. So it all worked out in a very beautiful way. But it made me, I had so much suffering in my life. I don't want any human to suffer. And I'm effing driven to end suffering wherever I can possibly make a difference. I don't want just end suffering. I want them to experience the joy and the happiness and the freedom and the love and the opportunity to live life on their terms.
But do you have to fail to be successful?
Yes.
Do you have to have suffering to be successful?
Well, you have to fail. I don't know if you have to suffer. You know, the old phrase, you know, pain is part of life, suffering's a choice, right? And I have and just in recent years, I've made a big change in that area of my life. You know, most of us, I think in the culture, this is a different room because people here, my guess is, I don't know you all personally, but you wouldn't be coming here figuring out how to be on the cutting edge, going next level if it was just a job for you or a career for you. You guys are in it to win it. You're in it to have an impact, is my guess for most of you. This is a mission drive for you. When it's that mission drive, it just gives you so much energy. You don't have to worry about, you know, trying to pump yourself up or do something like that. I mean, this room doesn't need to be motivated. I've never been motivated anyway. What I really try to do is have people figure out what's their drive. I'm more the why guy than the motivator. I want to know why you do what you do. You know, motivation term, I hate the term, but it's just what's your motive for action. And, you know, I'm the why guy. I want to know why you say you want this, but you do the opposite. I want to know why you say you want to be fit, but then you go eat all that stuff. I want to know why your relationships aren't working the way you are. So if I can figure out the why and show you tools and strategies that are real that you can go implement and you see a result, and I can do that with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, then I've made a contribution that feels meaningful to me.
If I met the 15-year-old Tony Robbins, would I have said this is going to be a successful kid?
15, what grade is that? Let's see. So that'd be like junior high school, like 9th grade, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be a professional baseball player. The father who adopted me, I had 4 fathers. His name was Jim Robbins, was a pro baseball player.
Right.
And, but I started very late. I had tremendous desire and no effing skill. And I hated when we lost. I would cry. I was an emotional creature. So if you'd seen me at that time, when I got cut from I was a really smart student and I was really good in science. And the science teacher, I was really his pet, Mr. Gaze. He was also the coach of the baseball team. So I went out for pitcher and did really well. And he was a very strict guy and I had very long hair. So I got to the final cut, I cut all my hair, and then it didn't work. He cut me anyway, and I didn't make the team. So that kind of started me looking, and around that time, you might have, because I learned how to type. I took a typing class. I was the only guy in a shorthand class because I wanted to go interview. I wanted to become a sportscaster or a sports writer. I wanted to be in the environment. If I couldn't be the person in it, I wanted to be a part of it. And I got a job at a local newspaper, and then I was offered a job on KTTV Channel 11 in LA at 15 years old. Because they tried Fannie Fox, they tried everything to try and get people to pay attention to their sports forecast. My mom took me out because she said my ego was too big and ended all of that. So you probably would have seen that he was this driven guy. I got an interview with Woody Hayes on, the night before the Rose Bowl, taking buses to Pasadena with my little brother with his Instamatic camera, taking pictures.
That's awesome.
I was driven. I've always had that drive. I've had to have that drive, or I wouldn't have survived.
What do you read for fun now?
I don't read for fun. I think I watch movies more for fun. For fun, I read Lucky Years.
All right.
There's so many hours in a day, and I'm so hungry for these things. And I'm involved with so many different industries, and now I'm involved with stem cells, with cellularity. We raised $250 million, and I've got unbelievable partners in Bob Harari and Peter Diamandis and so forth. So I'm on the edge of those things. I've been a beneficiary of those things. So I look at subject matters that go in that area, but the fun part for me is really play golf, swim, snorkel, scuba dive, do all the things that are more physical outdoor are the things that get me there, and they're part of how I really relax. I'm like, I push myself to a different extreme, so I relax, I think is probably.
And are you an extreme exerciser? When you snorkel, do you go, is it really pushing yourself?
No, I used to only do that. I used to have only one gear, not anymore. But when I do exercise, I'm a biohacker. I find the very best tools that produce the most intensive. And that's why I have these guys out to measure everything on me, right? So they're going to come up with a plan that helps me to demand even more. I'm 58 years old. My body operates, I'm able to get to do things better than I was when I was 25. But there is the accumulation, as you well know, of living a life with that kind of intensity for 58 years. And so I'm using every tool that I can find. I haven't gone to CRISPR yet, but I've done just about everything else you can imagine. Cryotherapy I utilize. Obviously I do stem cells outside the country, so I get cord stem cells because they're so much more powerful than the adipose or the bone marrow. So those are all things that I kind of do to keep myself in that place.
And do you self-educate on these things?
I do, but I wrote a book 5-6 years ago. I got so frustrated. I hadn't written a book in 20 years. I don't like writing books. I like new. I like it's different every time. I like the challenge of something showing up, and sitting and writing was not my gig. But I also have coached some of the top financial traders in the history of the world. Paul Tudor Jones, I've coached for 22 years, and heads the Robin Hood Foundation, some people will be familiar with in New York. And he's just a brilliant, incredible man. And he hasn't lost money in all those years that I've coached him. I literally coach him every day in writing, but then I see him 4 times a year. And so I decided I wanted to write a book. And so the way I wrote the book was, I said, I'm gonna interview 50 of the smartest financial people on the face of the earth. Warren Buffett, Carl Icahn, Ray Dalio, just the whole 9 yards. And so that's what I do. I go in and I'm really good at modeling. I'm good at digging in and finding out the differences that make the differences and extracting them from someone who's got more experience than anyone else on earth. So I wrote that book under the goal of...
That's Unshakable.
Well, I wrote a second book called Unshakable after, a smaller one. My first one was 670 pages, the first book I'd written forever. I wanted my billionaire clients to actually say it was valuable.
You do things, it's pretty...
Yes, I did. I wanted my billionaire clients to love it, but I wanted the general population, someone who's just getting started, to be helped by it. And Paul Tudor Jones, is one of my dearest friends, laughed and said, Tony, that ain't gonna happen. But it did. Another magazine, I won't mention the name, said that it was a book that if there had been a Pulitzer Prize for a financial book, this one would win hands down. So then I wrote Unshakable, a skinnier book, because I realized somebody's going to be intimidated by it, and I wanted to get it out before the markets changed to kind of help people. But the reason I tell you that is I'm doing the same thing now in the health field. I'm going to write a new book similar to what yours is. You're one of the people I want to interview for it. All the people that are here, I want to go and dig underneath and bring that to the general population so that they're aware of it. And I have a style of communicating that's good for some people, so I want to try and get that to millions of people. Plus, I've donated, all the money from my books. I've fed 300 million people in the last 3 years alone. And so in Feeding America, I was fed when I was 11. On Thanksgiving, I had no money and no food, and a man came to the door, and he was the delivery man. He wasn't the actual one giving it to us. And it changed my life. My dad was offended. But I was like, wow, strangers do care. And it changed my life, made me care about strangers. So when I turned 17, I fed 2 families. It was really emotional and beautiful. And then 4, and then 8, and then I got to 1 million people, and 2 million. And then I got my foundation feeding 2 million, and I mirrored it with 2 million. And then I was writing this book, interviewing all these billionaires, and watching them cut food stamps. They don't call it that anymore, but the same thing, SNAP program. They cut it by, I think it was $7 billion, which means if there's someone out there that really needs help, a family, a mom struggling, single mom, and they don't have food, and there's 49 million Americans that don't know where their next meal's coming from, in the richest country in the world, just makes me nuts. I wanted to make sure that I could have an impact on them. So I found out I fed 42 million people in my life, and I said, what if we fed 50 million people in a year? And then I got more excited, it's at 100 million. And now what I'm doing is I'm feeding 1 billion people over 7 years. So we fed 300 million, 100 million a year for the last 3 years. And it's all, again, come out of that. So I'll write this book, and I'll donate all these to some of the things I'm doing on the health side as well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So obviously, you're brilliant. What you do changes the world. You give back. You grew up with very little, and then all of a sudden, you amassed wealth.
Yes.
What was the first luxury item you bought? What was the first thing you did for yourself?
I think probably buying a car of some sort. I was a boy. Boys think cars are everything, and they're the boys. So yeah, I bought a Mercedes, I think, and then I was so stupid. I grew up very poor, so these were symbols to me. I got my office in Beverly Hills and all that bullshit. You just have to, when you don't have something, you think that's gonna make the change. But what was beautiful is I knew from the very earliest stages, I had a good teacher, and he taught me a long time ago that, what you get will never make you happy. Who you become, that'll make you very happy or very sad. And so my whole focus is be a blessing every day on the lives of anybody I meet. I'm fortunate enough now I can walk by, and some people feel like it's a blessing because of celebrity, whatever the hell that is, but taking a picture or light somebody up, but really helping somebody, somebody that's suicidal or somebody that's, help them turn their business around. And I get to work with people that are hungry. People ask me all the time, what's the common denominator? Because, you got a Mark Benioff or, Ray Dalio, all these superstar geniuses that are followers of my work. And then you got the average person just getting started. The extremes are pretty huge. And the common denominator is I see people when they're hungry. So people are the best in the world are always reaching out because they know one little 2 millimeter shift and you can end up in a completely different direction over time. And so they're hungry. They haven't lost their hunger. It's why they're the best in the world. So I get all the best. And then I also get people when they're at a position of challenge, because that's when people actually start to pay attention, just like they do in health, right? They should have taken care of it all along the way, but now there's a crisis, and now they're willing to do something. And they've tried everything else, so they'll try the crazy guy with the big teeth from TV. So that's something like that usually.
All right. So you've got 4 decades left when we start to look at actuarial tables.
Yes. Wow, I'm glad to hear that.
I don't believe in triple digits. So in these next 4
I
decades.
got 40, so you're counting on being 98.
So is your lifestyle sustainable? Can you keep doing what you do? I mean, I've seen you do it. There's no way you can sustain this for decades more, I don't think.
Well, they told me that, I went to Harvard because my throat was just, I finally thrashed it completely. And I went to a doctor, a really brilliant man. He deals with Steven Tyler and all those guys, the best in the business. And he asked me how long I spoke for. And I said, well, the average day is 12 hours. And he laughed like you did and didn't take me serious. He goes, no, really, how long? And I said, well, the shortest day is usually 9 or 10 hours, and the long ones are 14. And he said, people in the room. I said, yeah, for 3 or 4 days in a row, sometimes 7 days in a row. And he said, that's impossible. So he goes in, and puts a scope inside me, and they numb you up. And then he goes, no. And I'm like, and he leaves me with the thing down my throat and brings 2 more doctors, and they're all talking about that's not possible. So afterwards he came out, he goes, you've done something that medical textbooks would say is physiologically impossible. I've done this 38 years, never seen it. He said, your vocal cords are the size, they're supposed to be the size of your lips, and they're the thickness of your lips, and they're the thickness of a piece of paper. He said, there's no way you should be able to talk. So you got to the point where you couldn't speak, and the reason I talk and sound this tone, whatever you hear, is because I've found a way neurologically to fuse my false voice box to my normal voice box. He said, I've never seen it in my entire history, and he goes, that's how you're talking. So I'm not suggesting I'm bulletproof by any stretch. I think I've reached out to you. I just spent 2 days in New York with a doctor doing a battery of tests. I was just at Forward. Where's this Forward here?
Is Adrian?
Is Adrian in the room here? I was at Forward in San Francisco. Oh, there he is. In San Francisco, and I was in your place in LA today. I went through the full piece. And, I'm scoring in the top, 0.0001% psychologically and physically, so I'm still good. But the answer to your question is, I still need to be smart. I work to balance my life, but it's not draining me. The only place it hurts is too much lactic acid or too much of those things, and that's why I'm doing the things I'm measuring now. I think with technology, I can measure things, and if there's a challenge, I want to handle it when it's small, kill the monster while it's little, not wait till it's big, as I know you teach.
So, the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges we face in health is how do you get someone to do something today that's going to help them 10, 20, 30, 40 years out?
Yes.
Right? That delay, in disease,
yes,
in a sense, hurts us, right? There's no metric. I can't take a blood test and goes, you have a score of 100 or a score of 98. There's no metric for health.
Yes.
So how do we in our business and the people in the audience who have that issue all the days with their companies and their products, how do we get people to change today for tomorrow?
Whatever we do, I think you probably know, what we do is shaped by 2 things moment to moment. Because what we all in this room are influencers. What's a leader? Your job as a doctor, I would assume, or running a company is to lead. To lead is to influence. And I think influence really, or leadership really, is the ability to influence thoughts, feelings, emotions, and actions of another human being, and then do it with integrity, meaning for their greater good, not for yours, being like a fiduciary. And all doctors are, and all financial people are. So I look at that and I say, the biggest difference that you can make is learning how to change your client's state, whether it be your clients being your employees or whether clients being, a patient that's in front of you. Because the mental, emotional state we're in does everything. If you're in a pissed off, frustrated state, your biochemistry, as you well know, 5 minutes of rage and your immune system's suppressed for 5 hours, right? But I also found, I know that statistic, that I can do a stacking of positive emotion and shift somebody and have them 5 hours where they don't even know why they feel good during those pieces. So I look at the ways we can change state. And the way I found to do it, and I've taught for 41 years, is physiology first. The way we move determines the way we feel. And so you can't influence somebody else if you can't even influence yourself. Very often you'll see leaders who are in a crappy state and they're trying to lead somebody else. You can't do that. You can't get someone to do something you're not doing. You can't get someone to feel what you don't feel. You can't touch someone if you're not touched. You can't move somebody if you're not moved. So the first thing is your state. And really training yourself to measure it. Because just like medicine or anything else, or business, you can't manage something if you don't measure it. So I measure 0 to 10, where am I throughout the day? And it's not like I have to be at 10 every moment, but I know where I need to be in order to produce the greatest result. And then I know how to change them. And the most simple thing in this short moments we have here, and by the way, I pride myself on adding value. I only have 30 minutes, and he's asking me about my life, which doesn't mean shit to you. And so I want to serve any way I can any of you. So when we're done here, if any of you go to my website, I'll give you an address. And if you ever want to come to an event as my guest, I'd love to do it, because I'd love to add real value to you, not just 2 minutes like this. And I'm also appreciative that I was invited. Thank you very much. But in short order, emotion is created by motion. And what you're really talking about is compliance for people taking their pills, following all these things. It's all based on the emotional state they're in. So people have habits of emotional states. And so what I try to do is uncover what are the patterns that are in front of me right now. So for example, if we all in this room said there was a depressed person behind curtain number 1 over here, and I'll make a $100,000 donation to your favorite charity if you could describe them physically, you could. What's their posture like? Yell it out if you would, please. Slumped. Where's their head? Down. Breathing full or shallow? Talking slow or fast? Loud or quiet? Now, how do you know that? Because you've practiced this crap before, haven't you? We all have, right, at times. But if you take that same person whose shoulders down, all these things, and you don't change, most people try to change the mind. You know, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, and BS, you're not happy. Your brain knows that, right? But when you change the body radically, you change the biochemistry, the state changes, and they make a shift. So for years, I've taught people movement, sounds, elements to do this. Professional athletes. I just worked with the Warriors. You know, they're in bad shape. I guess KD's going to be here tomorrow.
Yeah, he's coming
he can be
tomorrow.
here because he's injured, right? But I just work with.
He's got nothing else to do, so he's coming here.
But they called me in because Steve Kerr's injured. You know, he's been injured for 3 years. The team's injured. They're back in second place. They're not where they want to be. So, but what do I got to do? I've got to come in, and these guys have the skill. They've lost the state. KD says, it was weird, I don't have Steph there. And, and he's busting his tail playing like crazy, but the team wasn't winning. So what I gotta do, I gotta come in and change the momentum. And the first place I change the momentum is physically in their states, because they all walk in, they're basketball players, and they're coming to a meeting with a coach, and you know what that is. You don't look at him, and you don't talk, you look at the ground, and that ain't gonna do shit. So I gotta come in and grab them. And so I find the ways to grab them, make them laugh their tails off, challenge them, bring a guy on stage, shift him right then and there. But I use physiology as the base, and then focus. Because what you focus on, you feel. If you're supposed to be with your husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend, meet them at 7 for dinner, you get there at 7, they're not there, what do you feel? Some people go angry, some people worried, it's just 7. What if it's 8:30 and they've not called or texted and you're there? Woman says, I'm full, I'm not waiting for the bastard anymore, right? But most people, they make up a story, right? And if you're focusing on you're mad, it's because they always do this, they don't care, they're probably screwing around with somebody else. If you were worried, you pictured them in a car accident. So I show people quickly how to change those states. And once people learn how to do that, it becomes addictive. Because they know that I'm not a victim. I don't have to wonder, do I feel good or not? I don't wake up in the morning every morning and go, wow, let's go kill it. I wake up some days and go, what country am I in? What city am I in? I got 3 hours sleep, my back hurts. But I know how to shift that to step up and deliver, and I really believe that's made a difference also why I've lasted so long, because I put myself in states where my body can put itself back in balance and heal, even though I'm making huge demands on it. And then, by the way, to answer your earlier question, I do a whole series of regimens to recover after these things. I don't just presuppose that it's all just going to come together, right?
Has the current president called you for advice yet?
No, I bet you're surprised to hear that he hasn't. He's always asking people for advice, isn't he? I know the current president pretty well. I gave him his first big speech. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending upon your point of view, I guess. He came to do a speech. I hired him, and I had a multi-speaker event I was doing, and somewhere in his head, he figured there was 200 or 300 people there, and we had 15,000. And he freaked out. He really freaked out. In those days, he wouldn't even shake anybody's hand. He was so worried about, getting some kind of bacteria on him. And but he got hooked, and he did the entire speech on, get a prenup. That was his entire speech.
Really?
That was the key to success, was get a prenup, of which. But, he was on that show, and people wanted to come hear him, it was there. So, no, I know him well. I know Hillary well. I know President Clinton well. I know, I've worked with all the living presidents. So they're all friends, and his communication style is one of the most difficult things that we all have to deal with. His actions are tough, but I think his communication style is part of the bigger challenge.
Is there a person in the world that you want to meet that you haven't met yet? Is there somebody out there who...
Hello. There's no one in particular at this stage of my life. I've every major entertainer, politician, business person, but when I hear about somebody that's brilliant, I seek them out.
Any popes?
Yeah, I'm meeting the Pope in a month, actually.
Seriously?
Yeah. We're going there for the. I'm sure some of you may be there. They have the annual conference that they have on regenerative medicine. So because of our stem cell company, I'm going and I'm meeting the Pope, and then I'm speaking. I'm the last speaker in the regenerative conference there.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So, as we conclude tonight, I mean, you have a group of healthcare executives, leaders in the health space. This is a group that has had ups and downs in our field. And, Affordable Care Act, yay, now we're, peeling back from it. Drug pricing, we get a lot of bashing in our field.
Yes.
At the same time, this is the hope for all of us. Yes. We need all the people in the audience to be successful for us to live long and well, et cetera. So how do we change the mood in our space? We've got the government knocking us down. We've got legislation here. We've got the people thinking pharmaceutical companies are bad. Healthcare companies are there to take our data or charge us too much. How do we change the mood?
Well, I don't think it's just medicine that's going through that mood right now. And I think everybody can see that, right? Every kind of movement that you see out there, we have come to a place where we no longer seem to find a middle road where everybody is either agrees with you or they're evil. If you look at things like all the issues, take outside medicine, say the safety and security of our children, there's nobody out there that doesn't want their kids safe. And yet we fight with each other as if the other side's evil because one thinks we should have guns and one thinks we shouldn't. So I don't know that there's a simple solution for you talking about, but in your space, there is a solution, and it is you first. It's like, you get on an airplane, what's the first thing they say? If we get into trouble, mask will come down, oxygen's there, and the first thing you gotta do is put it on your kid, right? No, why? Who do they tell you to put it on? Yourself, you selfish bastard. What's the deal here, right? But it's because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of them. So for leaders, what I always tell them is, it's you first. It starts with you, and it starts with your psychology. 80% of growing a business, if you look at what the chokehold is on a business, it's always the leader. And 80% of that chokehold is the psychology, and 20% is the mechanics. I mean, people in this room know the mechanics and strategies beyond what anybody on earth knows in their category. So it's really about you being in the state where you execute. It's like I always tell people, knowledge is not power, it's total BS. Knowledge is potential power. Execution trumps knowledge every day of the week, and so my life is, how do you get yourself to execute? And execution comes from learning to put yourself in that right state every day. The second thing is not allowing, and I've only learned this in the last 2.5 years myself. I look at life as having two master skills if you want life on your terms, whatever your terms are. Change the world, have a beautiful family, have a great business, laugh a lot, sing, whatever your terms are. You need to master the science of achievement, which most of the people in this room have done a hell of a job over, they wouldn't be in the room, including you and me. And then there's the art of fulfillment. And the art of fulfillment sounds boring as hell because people say, well, show me how to achieve and I'll be fulfilled. But I interviewed 50 billionaires and about 12 are really good friends of mine now. And I could tell you honestly that 2 are really happy people. And it has nothing to do with the money. Money doesn't change you. I always tell people, if you're mean, you have more to be mean with a lot of money. If you're, generous, you have more to be generous with. Money doesn't change people, it just magnifies their nature. And so if you really want to change your life, the fulfillment part's important. I mean, I give you a metaphor. I feel like we lost a national treasure about 3.5 years ago. It came in the form of a man that used to make us laugh. What was his name? Robin Williams. And you think of Robin Williams, how many of you, I'm curious in this room, by a show of hands if you would, how many of you, don't raise your hand if you liked Robin Williams, raise your hand if you loved him, only if you loved him, if you loved Robin Williams. Keep your hands up so I can see if you look around the room. If you keep your hands up, look around the room. It's about 98% that love this man. Only 2% assholes that didn't like Robin Williams. But the reason I bring this up is Robin was a super achiever. I mean, he came to Hollywood and said, I'm gonna be a star, I'm on my own TV show. Everybody says that. He did it. He said, I'm gonna have the #1 TV show. Some of you are old enough to remember Mark and Mindy, right? Me too. And then he said, I wanna have a magnificent family. Then he said, I wanna make more money than I could spend. He did all those things, he achieved it all. Then he said, screw that, I wanna make movies. Then he said, I want to not make movies, I want to make movies and I want to win an Academy Award for not being funny, his #1 skill, and he did it. And then he hung himself. Now, you can all say, yeah, but his brain was disturbed and we know he had the Lewy bodies in his brain. But let's be honest, he abused drugs and alcohol his entire life, and the reason was he made everybody happy except himself. My advice at the personal level is, Find out what really fulfills you, and you will not hurt for energy if you can tap into that. But what will really fulfill you, if you haven't already found it, my guess is you have, or you wouldn't be in a room like this, but you can augment it because you can get familiar with it. What really will unleash you is when you feel like your life has a meaning beyond yourself. I mean, when we have something that we're doing beyond ourselves, that's where the energy comes from. On a business side or a hospital side, David Feinberg's a friend of mine, used to run UCLA's medical schools, and he was a psychologist. He ran the little psychological center they had over there, and they had this hole, and they needed somebody right now, so they bring David in, and when they bring him in, he told me point blank, he said, Tony, I didn't know 3/4 what they're saying. Everything's an abbreviation in the hospitals, like the military, and they'd say, we need some SYZ, somebody, and he said, I have no clue what they're talking about. So I said, what'd you do? And this is the advice I give you as well, real quick. He said, what I did is I spent 3 months saying, I'm gonna learn everything I can about what people need and what they're mad about and what they want. And he did that most importantly with patients, but he also did it with a group. And I'll just give you 2 things to end. I know we gotta go.
Because I'm getting screamed at.
I see it, I can feel it. But I think this might be useful. I hope you'll hear me.
Yes.
He created a culture. He set a target, a vision bigger than himself, and he said, our goal here is to heal, and we're not. And here's how I know we're not. 29% of the people would recommend the UCLA hospital system to other people, which means 71% would not even recommend it, right? Which most hospitals, as you well know, do not have real high service ratings. He said, I want to get a higher service rating here at UCLA hospital system than they have at the Ritz-Carlton, and he succeeded. With 3 million patients, with 4 hospitals, and with 50,000 doctors who were not all in alignment, as you might guess, right? How did he do it? He did it by figuring out what the problems were. He didn't just focus on the medicine problems. He focused on the people problems and the process problems. He focused on the little stuff that really heals people and makes them feel at home and alive. And so little things, people being interrupted at 2 in the morning, at 10 at night after a surgery, and somebody's taking a trash can and food. But I'll give you 2 brief examples, we're done. 1, he had an experience, this would be how he created the culture. He had an experience where a woman came in for gallbladder surgery, and somebody did something wrong, messed up. They got the gallbladder out perfectly, but she got poisoned in the process, and instead of overnight, she was there for 6 days. Her husband brought her. He had to fly overseas for work. She leaves. She thought she was going to die. She leaves, goes, and doesn't have any money on her. Her husband's not there. She goes to the taxi place where they're supposed to give you a taxi piece, and they said, no, ma'am, you don't qualify. You have too much money. So she has like $14. She hires a taxi. He drives her within 3 miles of her house and dumps her. Right after she's in the hospital, she walks home. David finds out about this as the CEO of one of the largest hospitals in the world and personally drives to the woman's house, knocks on her door, asks to come in, apologizes, connects with her personally, said, I can never take away the fear and the pain you went through, and certainly make sure you didn't have to pay for it, but would you come with me back to UCLA and tell your story so I can bring all the doctors, all the nurses, everybody on the table, and show them what this means so they have an emotional association to what this consequence is. The impact of that is they changed, like, I forget the language you guys would all know, the mainline IVs that people die from very often. They got that number down to the lowest number, so low that the government came in and thought they were lying about the number, and he taught other people as well. One last example. Woman's dying of breast cancer, terminal breast cancer at UCLA. She's 67, 68 years old, if I remember correctly. And they find out that her daughter is about to have this grandmother's granddaughter at San Francisco at UCSF. David said, we are here to heal, and here's what we do. We do whatever it takes. You treat people like they're your mother. That's what he did. So the gallbladder thing, because the doctor said, I took the gallbladder out perfectly. What are you talking about? He ran into this all the time. He said, it's not enough to do the medicine. You got to heal the people. You got to create an environment. You got to treat them like they're your mother. And once they started installing that, they started changing things. What this nurse did, she called up to UCSF, had the woman flown down, the daughter flown down, had her have the baby right there while the grandmother got to hold her granddaughter, and 4 days later she died. To me, that's what medicine should be about in the world we're in today.
Well, Tony, all I can say is and I think everyone in the audience is so excited for your healthcare book. We need it. We thank you for sharing your wisdom, your words, your love with all of us. Tony's been very generous in that there's a website that'll be placed up here where you can go there and he will send you a copy of Unshakable, his most recent New York Times #1 best-selling book. And we thank you for what you do for the world.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, buddy.